This is Ann Grodin on May 12th, interviewed by Nancy Sherman. And we will begin with the personal questions, the first of which is, what are your first best childhood memories of libraries?
My favorite library growing up was more middle school age, was the Oakland Main branch, because I could go there on the bus by myself or with a girlfriend usually after school. And back in those days, we would also go shopping downtown Oakland and take the bus, but we had to be home before 5:30 when it started to get dark. The Oakland Main branch was just wonderful because there were different floors. You could go exploring. We had a copy machine, which the school didn't have. If you needed something for a report, it was just a great place to go explore as a young person.
And your home was in Oakland?
Yeah, I grew up in Oakland.
Okay.
Yeah, I grew up in Oakland.
Right.
And my parents, my mom in particular, read a lot to me as a young child. I always had a lot of books, so it was just a natural thing.
Great. Did your middle school have any kind of library at all?
I went to Bret Harte in Oakland, and I don't remember the library at the school.
Okay. Apparently it did not draw you in.
No,
you found yourself
yeah.
going elsewhere.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. How important would you say reading was to you when growing up? You said your mom or your aunt had many books?
My mother.
Your mother.
It was really important. I remember the library in my elementary school at Riverwood Heights in Oakland was the size of like a classroom and a half. And I read Gone with the Wind in 5th grade, and I just devoured that. I loved reading, so it was just a natural thing.
So would that have been one of your favorite childhood books, and were there others perhaps?
That was one. I loved the Beverly Cleary as a young person. Read all of those Beverly Cleary books whenever I could get my hands on them, when a new one came out, because that was back in the days when she was writing them.
Yes.
And never forget when my daughter was reading Beverly Cleary, we got to go meet her at a bookstore, book signing in Danville, waited in line and signed our books, and it was so wonderful.
So fun, yeah, generation to generation, yeah, passing it on. So you grew up in Oakland, and did you have an awareness of community while you were growing up there?
Somewhat. In high school, most certainly.
Okay.
I was in student council, and I was we at that time had an all-city council, of which I was a member for the whole Oakland Unified District, with representatives from all of the high schools. And I had been active in the YMCA in East Oakland, and that covered a lot of different schools. So I was aware of a bigger presence. But Oakland in the 60s had a lot of issues going on, and so all city council was really an important job, and we felt I don't think we did anything, but we felt we were important, trying to discuss the issues of the day.
You made your voices heard.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Can you tell us something more about your educational background and perhaps then your work experience?
I graduated from Skyline in Oakland and went to UC Berkeley. Graduated in '69. I graduated high school '66. I have postgraduate work units from the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis. My first job, I had worked part-time in high school and in youth work at the YMCA and telephone company and things. But my first real job was executive director of the Girls Club of Alameda. And that's how I picked up my extra units from the University of Minnesota. Was they had special training for youth work, and so I did that. And then
so what was your bachelor's degree?
Oh, political science.
Okay, all right.
Get a lot of jobs being a poli-sci.
Yeah.
Well, it makes sense for later on. And then I went back to school in, I I'm trying to think, it was 79, and went to John F. Kennedy and got a law degree. So, I forgot. In between, was always, tell you another story in a second. In between, when we lived in San Luis Obispo, I got a teaching credential at Cal Poly.
Did you teach?
Yeah,
Down there?
Yeah, in Morro Bay and in Cambria.
And what level?
High school,
High school.
history.
Did you love that?
I did. I really
Yeah.
liked it.
Yeah.
My mother used to joke that some people collected antiques and things, that I collected degrees.
Yeah. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. So then, did you come to Lafayette from San Luis? What attracted you here?
We moved, my husband's job, he was a newspaper reporter and editor, and we moved back to the Bay Area, and our family was up here. We originally moved to Moraga, and we liked Moraga, but our little family was outgrowing our house, and so we were looking for a larger house. And then we settled in this house when it was brand new.
And that's been?
That was in 1982 or 83. So.
Okay.
Yeah, we'd lived in Moraga 7 years before that. So I've been here a long time.
Is there anything particular about Lafayette that brought you here?
No, we.
You said a bigger
We
house.
we needed a larger house. My parents lived in Alamo, Danville. It's now incorporated, so or they've redone the boundaries.
Indeed, a couple of times.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's being close to them. My husband's parents lived in Oakland still, so we wanted to be back in this area. We have just a lot of friends in the area.
Okay. We'll move on then to more community-based questions at this point. And I have one here that says, if we define the goals of a community as a place of mutual support, shared values, and acceptance of differences, how do you see Lafayette meeting these goals?
I
What do you
think that Lafayette has socially matured a lot in the past 20 years. I started being active in the community through the Chamber of Commerce. Our business was Valley Disposal, and Lafayette Disposal we purchased, the garbage company. That's my father's business, and then after law school I went to work for him. And it's kind of unexpected, but his partners passed away, and we needed people to, family members in the office, and so that's what happened. And I did a lot of the outside work and the community work with different chambers of commerce, and I really enjoyed Lafayette. But back in those days, in the late 70s, early 80s, there was a more of distrust of business interests in town, and the homeowners, and I think a lot of that has matured and gone away. And the city government too. There were like 3 separate entities, and they never seemed to cross paths or listen to each other talk, and they all had the same interests. Being active in the chamber, that was one of my goals, to try to get folks to start talking to each other, because it was so obvious that everybody cared about the city so much and knew it was a special place, and each had incorrect perceptions of the other's point of view. And it used to be within the chamber, the city gave them money, and because this chamber does a lot of work for the city as an information center and things like that. And there's the times when the city's budget was short, but then some of the chamber members felt they shouldn't take the money because then they might be beholden to the city to do things. It was like, you don't understand, you're all talking about, there's no them and us, it's everybody together. And I think a lot of that has gone away, And so I think that as we've matured as a city, we incorporated back in '68. And
I was just trying
yeah.
to remember when the incorporation happened.
Yeah, for me personally, it's an interesting coincidence. But Bob Fisher, who was on the very first city council, was one of my professors at Cal, and I was close to him. And so I worked on his campaign here in Lafayette, never knowing that that's where I was going to end up settling. So I was familiar with things when the issues when it incorporated, and how it incorporated, and then years later we settled here, and then I got active in city government through the Chamber of Commerce.
Well, Lafayette is not a young city. Well, it's not a young place of business and homes, but it's a young city, I guess, in terms of incorporation. But it takes time to grow up and to get that sense of.
Well,
community.
it does, and a lot of people that moved to Lafayette. I remember when it really was growing, because we lived in Oakland, and a lot of my parents' friends' homes were taken by the MacArthur Freeway.
Yeah.
And these were people that they bought their first homes after World War II, and GI Bill, a lot of them, and they're wonderful neighborhoods. And that freeway came through and took down middle of Oakland. And I mean, you never could do that today.
Right.
Never would happen in a million years. And so those people moved to Hayward, Castro Valley. The hills of Oakland, of course, developed at that time because people wanted to stay in town. And if you couldn't afford any place else, you had to move all the way out to Lafayette on the other side of the tunnel. It was sort of like the Antioch of today. It was like the building of the new suburbs, way far away. And I remember coming out to my friends' homes, and I thought it was really wonderful. They had horses and things, you know.
That's right.
And you know, it was out in the country, but you know, it was just a very different way of life. And for the people that had to commute and that lost their homes because the government bought them for the freeway, there was a lot of resentment against government. And I think it took 20 years for that to go away and people to get over that, to really realize that there really is a community here, which grew up quite nicely.
We'll move on to the library now and ask what your earliest memories of Lafayette's library might be.
Oh, well, I think because I loved my library downtown Maine and Oakland so much, when I first took my children to the library, they were, well, Matthew was little. My children went to Seven Hills for elementary. We had been in Moraga before, and the schools in Moraga were having problems. We've been very lucky in Lafayette that we haven't had the problems that Moraga did with their schools. So, and Seven Hills had a wonderful, just fabulous library at their school. Also, it was close to our office and had after-school daycare, and it worked out wonderful for us. It was great. But taking our kids to the Lafayette Library, it was such a disappointment because it was so small and things were so jammed together, and the periodicals and things that you might need were there. You had to go to Pleasant Hill.
That's right.
And it was a waste of time because it was so small. And then when they got to junior high, the younger children had a nice area that has a lot of picture books, and they did well for that. And at that time, for the junior high age, they had one turnstile of books and one chair next to that. And it was just a joke. It was just so disappointing. And so we just didn't use it. And it really bothered me because my children didn't really get to grow up with the library. Pleasant Hill Library, at that time in the early 80s, times of cutbacks for government, you know, you had to wait in line to use the copy machine, or at that time the microfilm, and you'd take those rolls and you'd and they were so scratched and used so well, you could hardly read the article. You know, all this is before computers.
That's right.
And
That's right.
and so they don't. I think we've lost a generation somehow in there of young people that don't really understand the depth of knowledge that you can find in a library and in the resources that you have in a computer. The younger generation is starting to comprehend and starting to understand. You don't believe everything, and you have to know where your sources are that you're searching. But there's sort of a middle generation that might have lost some of that, unfortunately.
So this next question is perhaps not pertinent. How often do you personally use the Lafayette Library, and for what particular reasons? Perhaps you don't.
Well, I do. I belong to a book club, and I usually check to see if I can get my book through there. It's a lot of times I can, sometimes I can't. The book we're reading for book club this time, Edward Sawtell.
Uh-huh.
There were
How
40.
many copies?
Well, they had a lot of copies, but there were 43 holds. You know, it was
Very
like,
popular book.
yeah. So it's just, you know, the
Yeah.
way it is.
Yeah. How do you feel a library serves a community? Big question.
It's a community resource, basically.
Indeed.
It's just in the new library will be a lifelong learning center. It's where you go as a new person to a community to find out what's going on. It's a safe place to go with your kids. It just has 1,000 resources, and the librarians are just fabulous.
Have you been involved in the library in some way over the years?
Okay, now we start.
Yes.
And I had to go back and do a little research to try to get some of the dates. I was elected to the city council in 1991. And the year I became mayor in 93, and it was 93, 94, was a time that we put the first ballot measure on county-wide for the library, Measure B, to raise funds for all of our libraries.
Was it that long ago?
Yeah, well, there's been several.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's the first time I really got involved with the library. And what was most interesting at that time was there was not uniform support from the Mayor's Conference for Measure B. There was a lot of infighting between the cities and the county, and it felt that the county was shirking its duty, and there was a lot of community resentment against the employees' public union for not letting volunteers do more work in the library. There were a whole laundry list of issues that really set people off. And it set the tone to be very bad for many, many years and hurt libraries in our counties, and needlessly. But what was interesting is that a lot of people worked hard and to try to solve those issues. The Board of Supervisors formed an ad hoc task force with the Mayor's Conference, and we started meeting at least once a month, and we met for a year to maybe 18 months to try to smooth out all of those issues that the cities had and the counties had. Oh, there's jealousies. Walnut Creek had 2 branches, Concord 1. Concord was a bigger city. Half Concord uses the Ignacio Valley branch of Walnut Creek. The county operates as a county system and doesn't look at city boundaries.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
people live where they live.
Yeah.
They go to the nearest one. They don't care what
Yeah.
whose city limits it's in. But for the elected officials, somehow that became an issue. There was resentment against Pleasant Hill having the largest library, hours open more, being a smaller city. You just list went on and on. It was one of the most contentious things of government I've ever seen. What a waste of time we did. And we had consultants come in to try to smooth things over, and what we ended up doing was we agreed to disagree, and we gave the issue back to the Public Managers Association of all of our city managers that we have all hired, and said, you are paid to solve these problems. You guys sit down and meet and solve the issue, because as elected officials, we weren't getting anywhere, and it was too much politics, too many personalities involved, and each person, you know, if they're coming up for re-election, they wanted to puff their feathers up. Anyway, that caused a lot of problems for our county. But the city managers were very wise, and they came up with solving things. And I was appointed by the mayor's conference to be to represent all the mayors to the city managers. And so that's how I really got involved with knowing all about the library issues of not from our own little Lafayette point of view, but from a countywide system.
Perspective,
yeah. And that lasted through the next couple of years. I mean, that really went hot and heavy into '95. But back in '94 is when the city of Lafayette was developing its redevelopment district. And we had formed the redevelopment district earlier, but it took us a while to develop a project list. And in that project list, in December of '94, is when I made sure, we wrote in there, to rebuild or upgrade the library facilities.
Wow.
That we could spend the money from redevelopment on that. A few years before, I'm not sure if it was actually '92 or 3 when it was, when we negotiated with the county on the formation of the boundaries of our redevelopment district for the city, the library became the main issue. And that's, of course, all the time when the library issue that I just mentioned before, the mayor's conference, was all going on. The county realized that it needed to get out of the library business. It was good at running the libraries. It needed to be a county-wide system, but the buildings themselves were not something the county had the money to maintain. By law, they have to do the jails, the sheriff's department, the health department. There's certain obligations that a county has.
Libraries are not
libraries are not mandated in
yeah.
that sense, and if a city wants a library, they can build their own building and make it as glorious as they want or not, and then the county the county barely can maintain those buildings, and a lot of places don't. And that's what caused so many of the arguments, over with the mayor's conference. How often you get your windows washed, all this nonsense. Anyway, so when a city forms a redevelopment district, and redevelopment law is very arcane, it's very weird. Counties naturally sue the cities because they don't want to lose their tax base. What you do when you have a redevelopment agency is you freeze the taxes at that particular time. Those agencies that get that money get that amount that they've always gotten, but as your tax base grows, the new growth comes into the redevelopment district. So when there's a lot of negotiations to allow that to happen. When Lafayette made its redevelopment, we said we want to freeze it, and we want the redevelopment to come in for just the area within the boundaries, and that was within the downtown area. So it's only the outline of the downtown, half a block deep someplace, a block deep in others, where those downtown properties are. And so as those properties turn over and as their property value increases, the increased property value of that comes to the city. The taxes that were collected for the fire department and for the schools were not a part of that. All that new increased in taxation went to those districts. The city said, we know that we need to maintain that. The county said, understands that cities need to get some money, otherwise we needed to repair the storm drains. We have a lot of things on our redevelopment list that you don't have money for otherwise. So the county negotiates because they're going to get their base money. They're just not going to get the growth money for the next 35 years. So the county said, as part of the deal, if you take over your library building and buy it from us within 14 years, we won't sue you. And we negotiated the price of the library at that time, and we said, deal.
Wow.
So they got rid of something that cost them money.
Exactly.
And we got money.
And you got it.
And
yeah.
so that was, so I was in on those
How
negotiations.
exciting.
The best part of it was when it was written, and we didn't even realize it till afterwards, and was that the library itself, when we said any money that we spend on the new library is above the redevelopment cap. You can, for redevelopment districts, you can't go forever. There has to be a cap
Yeah.
on the limit of the money that's raised, and then after that, when that expires, then it goes back to the county. Well, in that one line was put that any money spent on building the new library could come out of the redevelopment area and be above the cap, because we knew we'd have to redo the library. And that has allowed us, because how wonderful, since the early 90s, our down has grown, and
Yeah.
so we are having money coming into the redevelopment district, that we have money to build the beautiful library that we have
Wouldn't
today.
have had it otherwise.
Right. So it was,
Amazing.
we worked hard, we thought we had the right language, and we didn't know how good it was till we actually sat down and
Amazing.
scratched our heads a few years later and said, whew, that was
Yeah,
a really
so
good
pat
line we put
yourself
in there.
on the back, yeah.
You know, it's
Amazing.
like,
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, is
and I
there-
think actually that line was probably written by Anne Marie Gold, who was the county librarian at the time.
at the time.
And she was the county employee.
Yeah.
But she actually did live in Lafayette.
Oh,
So it's everybody stuck to the deal, and it's in the the county likes to have the new libraries. It's better for their employees. They don't have these old buildings to maintain that are
Sure.
so expensive. And the cities, of course, it's good. It works out well for everybody, but it's a give and a take. So that's kind of how I got started in all of this
Yeah.
stuff.
well, is there any more of that you'd
Oh
like
yeah,
to share?
I will go on.
Okay.
We've only done a little bit.
Okay.
In 96, I'm on the council, and we were looking at office spaces for the city. The city in Lafayette have never owned an office building, a city hall. And many reasons for that. People feel it keeps government smaller if you rent. There's lots of philosophies. I was always of the philosophy that if you had owned your own building, you'd pay for it once and you wouldn't have to keep paying for it. Other folks feel differently, that if rent gets too high, you can move to another building. I never bought that argument, because I think the rents all go up the same amount every place in the city. It's not like you're in San Francisco where there are more choices. Here in Lafayette, it's more limited, but that's a whole nother argument. So we had a commission, city, what was it called? City Offices Task Force. And they were to look at finding city offices, to study the issue, to see could you find a spot, and would it make sense financially. And we have wonderful citizens who volunteer for the committees, who have backgrounds in real estate and finance. And what was most interesting is that out of that task force, they came up with a specific recommendation that we should build our city offices and a new library together. They felt that the citizens would approve of that as a way to get new city offices, because they would approve of the new library, because our library was so decrepit. And the library was built in '62. Within 4 or 5 years, we had outgrown that building.
Exactly.
And so
Well, that was a cunning thought, Bill.
I thought that was quite interesting. So back in '96, people started talking about it. And they gave a variety of sites of where this could happen, from around the BART station property to including the site at the old Veterans Building where it's being built now. So people, more the insiders in town, started talking then about a new library. Of course, the whole idea of the city offices filtered away. There wasn't a lot of support for that. And in '97, the city did a survey by Brad Senden, who does a lot of the surveys for the schools for their ballot measures. And although it was not the main focus of the survey, we were doing more studies for roads and drains then, the question was asked about support for a library in town. And it was interesting, the answer came back that there was very weak support to get 2/3 vote for a measure to build a new library. 2/3 is a lot.
It is.
And
difficult to get.
basically what they felt that few people were really aware of the proposal. And if you wanted to do that kind of a measure on the ballot, you had to really develop a broad base of support.
Mm-hmm.
In '97, the county did a survey of all of the library buildings that were older, and the Lafayette's came back as totally inadequate because of asbestos, size, number of books, accessibility for anyone with a handicap. And so here we had written documentation by an outside consultant that the county had done that our library was just dreadful.
Was that asbestos problem taken care of, by the way?
No, it's okay as long as you don't disturb it.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's if you want to do any remodeling or anything
Then
else,
you have to deal with it.
then you have to deal with
Yeah.
it. And it's the same way with the restrooms. I don't know if you know, but we have a volunteer that is in a wheelchair, volunteers many, many hours for the library and for the Friends.
Yes.
And fortunately, she lives nearby, because when she has to go to the bathroom, she has to go home.
Oh, really?
I mean,
There's no handicap
there's no
access.
handicap access.
Yeah.
It's a crime.
It is.
I mean,
It
and you go in there and kids have their big backpacks. There's no place to put your backpack down. And so they kind of leave them on the floor by the door. When you open the door, you can trip over them trying to get into the little stall.
I've
I
never
mean,
used
it's
the restroom.
it's dreadful.
Yeah.
Anyway, so as a city council, we had more written documents that we knew that we had a real problem. And so by July of '97, the city staff wrote a report to the city council that we should take a look at putting a ballot measure on to raise money for a new library. And we started meeting with the schools to discuss this. Because we didn't want to put it on at the same time that the schools were putting their bond measures on, didn't want to have fighting things.
Yeah.
It basically, we felt that the schools needed the money more, and the city backed away from it a little time. And we really went back to what the survey a year before had told us, is that if we wanted to do a library, we needed to build a broad base of support. So in September of '97, the city created an ad hoc committee called the Lafayette Library Information and Brainstorming Meeting. And I chaired that meeting in '97. And on the agenda was Dreams for a New Library. And we got together folks, and we brought people in to start talking about how can we do this, who do we bring in. And the Historical Society was really first to come forward, because they had wanted to build some kind of place to store all of their wonderful materials that are now in everybody's garage and under the bed and everything.
Right.
And they said, we'll join with those that want to build a new library if we can have some space. And so that first happened in '97. And then at that, and so we met for a while and discussed that at the end of '97 and beginning of '98. In '98 is again when the county put another countywide measure for libraries, an 1/8 of a cent sales tax. And I worked on that campaign at the county level. Unfortunately, it failed, but it got 64.5% of the vote.
pretty close.
Pretty close for a countywide measure, and we were still having problems with Concord. It was passing almost every place. In certain cities where the city council was not endorsing it because they felt they wouldn't get enough for their city, you were losing just enough votes that you couldn't get it to pass countywide. And it was so frustrating because in the Loma Linda area, we're getting close to 70% of the vote, not getting enough, don't have a big enough population base to go over someplace else. In 1998 was Lafayette sesquicentennial. Yep. Oh, doves flying around. Was the sesquicentennial. And we had a lot of folks that worked on that committee. We had a lot of events and celebrations for our city's 150th birthday.
I remember.
I was mayor that year, and what came out of that was people felt that we should try to raise money that year to build a new library. That should be the gift to the city. Lots of events and very little fundraising. We really didn't know what to do. We had no scope of plan, but what was interesting was that we were slowly beginning to build community awareness, building a base for need of that in our community. I mean, it's, of course, friends of the library, working for many years, they knew about it, but trying to build a citywide base,
Yeah, they're a small group.
took a lot of
does
folks.
take time.
And you had to bring people in that weren't normally involved in city government, because, frankly, we all talk to ourselves a lot. It's just the way it is. So that really, I think, is when our community started to coalesce. And that sales tax measure failing countywide really brought our own library issue to the forefront. People really saw the need. They saw our own little library struggling. So it was in that year, I was mayor from 98 to 99. I started the task force, the Library Vision 2000 Committee. And we created it as a city and an elementary school board joint meeting to create Vision 2000. And then we had representatives from every group in town that we could think of, from the homeowners to Lions to Rotary to every group we could think of, Seropta. We invited everybody to come, and there were 25, 30 people that we met.
Sure, yeah.
And
which is what you need.
yeah, and we gathered all kinds of materials. We had the facilities report that the county had done. We gathered study information about other libraries. And so we started educating ourselves. So what do we need to know to start a new library in Lafayette? In 99, in October of 1999, the Vision 2000 Committee made their presentation to the City Council and to the school board, and we did a report of what should be in a new library. We went to visit 12 other new libraries in the entire Bay Area. We we took pictures. We said, this is what's new in libraries, this is what we don't have, this is kind of how many square feet you need from the state study per population. We did a study of how many audiovisual materials we had. We looked
very
at,
comprehensive.
yes, we did circulation of branches, and we started looking at a variety of spots where they could be in town.
Is that in the archives now, a copy of it?
I don't know, but it's for you.
Oh,
I had
thank
two.
you, because that's very important.
Yeah, this
Very
was
important.
and this is was our original material that we
Yeah,
started,
yeah,
existing needs
collected.
that we collected, and each person on the committee got that. We had samples of surveys that we had done in the
Wow,
past.
Wow, well, that's fabulous.
So we had,
They
and
may want to see that too
yeah.
at some point.
So
yeah.
I have a copy of this, not in a binder that you can have too.
Excellent. Excellent.
So we started with all of that.
What a resource.
I have the press release that came out with that
Okay.
for your archives and the
Okay.
list of committee members.
Oh, fabulous. Oh, yeah, 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 fabulous. Okay. And I think most of those people are on the, but not everybody, on the interview list.
Mhm.
Wonderful. Okay.
Whoops. Can't get on that.
I got it.
You got all these papers?
Yep.
Okay. And here was a little summary of some of the stuff that I've gone through that was put together actually for the next tax election in 2000 for the countywide measure that tells background of our county library system and how we got from 78 to 2000. So that's
Well,
some
that's a very
background.
interesting tool, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it kind of tells what happened over the years and really goes back when the libraries took their first hit from Prop 13 and then how the state began raiding the library funds. It used to be the state sent down bundles of money that were for libraries specifically to the counties. And then that changed and those funds got raided. So that gives you some of that background.
Yeah, how that
Anyway,
happened. Yeah,
so
when it happened.
yeah. So I've kind of gotten up to the sesquicentennial and the task force, and then we made our presentation. And then we kind of thought, okay, city council knows we've got a whole lot of folks involved. What are we going to do? And at that time, it was coming up for me to make a decision if I was going to run again for the city council. I'd been on for 8 years, or do something else. And I firmly believe in term limits. And so I said, 2 terms is enough. And I said that I'm going to go off the council and figure out how to coalesce this group, because I've been the chair, and to move forward and see if we could work to figure out how to move forward to build a new library. Been working with the Friends. Earlier they had been involved in all this from the very beginning, but they had made the decision early on that this was not what their mission was. Their mission was to support the existing library, and they felt they really couldn't do both. They felt they couldn't lead a capital campaign and continue to raise funds for ongoing needs. And we said, fine, we get a separate group of people that care about doing this other project, and we'll just all work together. And that's how we.
And that happened.
That's how what happened. And we're very lucky. We all had good relations with the Friends. It was great. So in 1999, I began trying to figure out how to form a foundation to raise money for the library. I had been in nonprofit work before as professional. I worked for Campfire Girls and also girls clubs. And of course, in business, many years in business, and I had done volunteer work on that side, but I hadn't really ever started a foundation. So I went to talk to Bob Fisher.
I was going to suggest there's your.
Yeah. So, and we kept
And you knew him from JFK.
Yes, I knew him from JFK,
Uh-huh.
and also from when I was in college. And he's kind of my mentor. So I said, okay, Bob, this is what we're talking about doing. And he said, okay. He took me by the hand and he said, we're going to go to the East Bay Community Foundation, and you can become a part of them. And it was serendipity, because East Bay Community Foundation had just received a grant from the Irvine Foundation in Southern California to help new foundations get started to spread philanthropy.
Oh, perfect timing.
So Mike Howe, who is the head of the East Bay Community Foundation, came to our meetings, and we had a group of folks that actually I started earlier in June of '99. I had people over to my house, and we said, how are we going to do this? And so we had the beginnings of the starting. And so by the end of '99, Mike had us officially formed, and the East Bay Community Foundation, prepared our bylaws and the filings with the state and those kinds of things that normally cost money to do, we had some experts doing them for us. And helped us with our mission statement and really got us launched.
Oh, fortuitous, really.
Yeah, that was just really wonderful. And so I have a brochure here from the beginning. Anyway, here was our first brochure, how we looked.
That's lovely.
And what we started in, and we said that what we were going to do from the very beginning was to raise money for a library, but also our board said, you know, and Bob taught us fish of this, you're a community foundation. Once you get all those folks together for the library, don't lose them, because that's a good group of folks that you will have, and you can do things to help the community in other ways.
Absolutely.
So from the very beginning, we started raising money for our general fund as well as for the library. And ever since we first started, we've been able to give away about $20,000 every year to local community groups, a variety of groups, as well as build our coffers to build the library.
Well, that's amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
little
really is.
little did we know
Yeah.
that we would be able to raise $12.5 million.
Yeah,
Because in the beginning, we didn't know what we were doing at all.
and it's a
But-
big number.
Yes, but what we did was we went out and we got help. We talked to the folks in Orinda and said, how did you do this? And they said, you really need to hire, I'm getting ahead of myself, but they said you needed to hire a consultant. But I want to skip back to the end of '99. So we created this foundation at the end of '99. I was lucky enough in 1999 to be named Citizen of the Year. I took I used myself shamelessly, and at my Citizen of the Year dinner, I had sign-up sheets for everybody that came to work on building the new library. So I got names and addresses of mostly people I already knew, but I didn't have all information and phone numbers about everybody. And at that time, the Chamber of Commerce presented a check to me at the dinner for $2,000 towards the new library.
Wow.
And the Park Hotel, not to be outdone, Dan Kelly stood up and he pledged $5,000.
Wow.
So we had money in the bank to go.
How exciting. How
So
exciting.
it was
That was the first step.
it
really,
was
wasn't
it was a launch,
Yeah.
as well as that end of that year, the foundation sent out letters, as you would as an organization,
Yeah.
saying, "This is we're new community foundation. This is what we're doing," and people sent money in, and we were just blown away. So in February rolled around, that was a leap year, and we called it. We had an event on the 29th. We called it Leap for Largesse, and that was our first real public event to launch the Community Foundation and the library together. And we had it at the Oakwood, which was new then, and they hosted it. It was a wonderful event, and people came. There was excitement because seeing the new Oakwood athletic facility, and people wanted to be part of the new library. And so we were getting going at that point. We were still creating the foundation, learning all the parts that you need for a foundation to be legal, which is a lot of work. And to do it right, because we figured if we're raising money for the library, we can't be just like a little tiny neighborhood group, like a homeowners group. We had to make sure that we had all of our ducks in a row and had all the legal papers. You have to file, 3 places with the state. It's, as well as with the IRS, everything. So it took us a while to keep getting organized. By May of 2000, the city created a committee to build a new library, and really helped us move forward. The foundation said, we're going to help raise the money, but it's going to be a city building, and the city acknowledged that and created a committee, and I was one of the members of the committee. And the purpose of the committee was to select a project advisor, a project architect, and a building program consultant, all the things that you need to do to build a city building.
And it's a lot.
It's a lot, and it's not like building a house where you go out and get an architect. For city buildings, there's a whole different standard and all kinds of state requirements that you have to meet. And at the same time, we were setting up focus groups in the community to determine needs for the new library. We had the 2000 report that we had done, and we had focus groups in that, but we needed, those were more on an informal basis. We did it ourselves. We had not hired any outside consultants. We knew to be taken seriously for grants and things, you really have to do things in a formal manner. So by 2000, the focus groups started. And by April of 2000 is when we created a campaign cabinet under the Lafayette Community Foundation, so the board was busy making itself a new foundation and being launched and doing things as an overall foundation, and we had another core group that would be the campaign cabinet, we decided, and that happened in April of 2000. The purpose, I'll give you this whole list, was to raise significant capital funds for the construction of a new Lafayette Library facility and to assist in coordinating other library construction fundraising activities by community organizations. And that was the, from our minutes of how we created that from the Community Foundation. And so by then other people wanted to help us. And in April, the Lafayette Lions Club had a fashion show to raise money for the library.
I remember that.
And by May, the Community Foundation really created a multi-year fundraising plan to achieve the goal of doing the library. And we knew that would take many years, and so we started trying to figure out, okay, how do you really seriously go about doing this? And several of us took classes through the Foundation Center in San Francisco and Compass Point, another nonprofit organization that trains nonprofit folks. And the city...
Did you set up goals or steps along the way to proceed to
Yes.
the end game?
Yes, and our goals kept being revised because until we actually had a plan, well, we didn't have a site for the library at that time.
Okay.
And until we knew that actually raising money, we were raising money.
Yeah.
And by the end of in 2001, we had almost $400,000. But we knew that we need in the millions.
Yeah.
After all, Orinda's library cost $4 million.
Yeah.
And so we're thinking, well, we've started, but that's just a small start. So we made these goals, and we knew it would be multi-year, but we knew that we really could not start raising big money until we had a site, and we knew how many square feet it would be. Because if you want to ask somebody for $1 million, they're going to
know where it's going.
Exactly. It was too ephemeral at that point. So the city started holding public hearings and had city staff identify 12 possible sites. And they had a library site analysis and economic planning system, and the company they hired to review the sites, and they winnowed that down to 3 sites. And my job at that point, I wasn't on the city council, but I had a foot in the door still. And I kind of went on the road as a speaker. And so I talked to all the service clubs and in the homeowners groups, anybody that would listen. What's going on with the library? How come it's taking so long to build a new library? Here's the 12 sites, and we had the public hearings, and here's what everybody thought was wrong with every site.
Yeah.
It's Lafayette. Everybody has an opinion.
Everyone has an opinion. That's right.
Oh, you can't make left turns there. Oh, there'll be too much traffic. Oh, the kids will make too much noise. Oh, blah, 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 blah. And there was something wrong with every site. And we kept coming back to the site where the Veterans Building was. And the veterans were not interested at all in talking with the city.
Yeah.
And as council members in the past, we had been harangued by the veterans. And most of these guys, rightfully so, chips on their shoulder because they're Vietnam era guys, and all the veterans buildings were built I guess in the 30s and 40s. And their buildings were built downtown when in all over California when downtowns were smaller, and it was a community building. And cities wanted that property. Almost every city had taken away their veterans buildings because counties and veterans did not have money to maintain them well. There was no plan of how to maintain those buildings after they were built. And the veterans groups were small because after World War II there were big veterans groups, but after the Vietnam era, veterans groups guys didn't do that anymore.
That's
they
right.
didn't get together,
Yeah.
so there wasn't a big base of money to help maintain the buildings. So they're run down. So, through veterans organizations, they developed a healthy attitude against cities, rightfully so, because cities kept taking their buildings, and they were left with nothing that they'd been promised, these places. So anytime we started looking at that site, they came at us and said, "Go away. You just want to steal our buildings and you're not going to do anything for us," and blah, blah, blah. And it was really, you could see it happening all over California.
So
they were
how did you
right.
remedy that?
Well, it was interesting. Their building became so bad and so hard for them to use.
Exactly.
Because it was such an unusual way it was built. The main meeting room downstairs was a nice enough room, but ceilings were way too low, and the restrooms were between the two floors. And so the older gentlemen
That's hard to get
couldn't
around.
go up the stairs with their walkers or whatever to go to the bathroom. And then the upstairs the roof had leaked so much. I mean, it was just terrible. There was one of the rooms, I mean, you just saw the water stains on the walls. And so there were a few younger members in the group that said, "Okay, let's talk to the city and tell them what we really want and see if they bite." And they said, "We want a new 10,000 square foot building that we can use, and that's all on one floor." And I was in that meeting, and they handed this list, and they crossed their arms, and they thought, they're not going to ever say yes. And city council member, I think Don Townsend was there, and Steve Falk, I know, was there. And they said, "Okay, well, we're going to work on that. We think we can work with you." And these men almost fell out of their chairs. And a part of it was they knew their site was the best site for the new library for the kids. And, they're heroes. They wanted to still be the heroes.
That's lovely.
And bless them that they wanted to make that happen. But
they wanted something for
themselves
too.
too. And I think things had changed enough in the community. People knew that veterans deserved something.
Yeah.
We weren't going to steal the building from them like other cities had done. And we also, as a city, we needed that community building. We needed it to be rehabbed because people need meeting spaces and rental buildings.
Exactly.
And they are willing to be the agents as the rental agent. And we knew that it would be a hard negotiation, a hard battle to win. And it took 2 years of negotiations from that first meeting. You're dealing with the American Legion, the Veterans of Foreign Wars. Walnut Creek also wanted to get rid of their veterans building, which was located directly across the street from the new multiplex theater.
Yes.
And they built a monument to their veterans, and they said, "That's what we're going to do." And the veterans said, "No, that's not enough." Those are very nice step pillars things that they built outside City Hall, but that's not a meeting hall.
Yeah.
But, when you don't have a lot of members, spending millions of dollars on a building doesn't make sense.
Right.
So we sat down with City of Walnut Creek and said, "Will you put some money in the pot to help build a new building?" And Walnut Creek came up with $1.5 million. And we knew we could spend some of our redevelopment funds on this. And we said to the veterans, and they had to get the Walnut Creek veterans groups, of which, of course, there was the American Legion and Veterans of Foreign. So we had 4 veterans groups, the city of Lafayette, the city of Walnut Creek, and of course the county, because it was a county-owned building.
Exactly. Exactly.
So that's why the negotiations took years, 2 years. But we did it. And we built a lovely new veterans
Oh, it's
building
wonderful.
that
That's
is a
amazing.
wonderful resource for our community. The veterans are very proud of it.
They should be.
I think their membership has grown because it's a building they can use, and it's a building they can rent out. And it's been a win-win, I think, for everybody. And then that freed up the site, which was almost a full acre, that parcel of land, for the city to purchase from the county to build the new library. The city at the same time bought another second parcel of land adjacent to it from an individual property owner that lives here in Lafayette that had rented it out as a storage for basically tow truck storage. So it was a better use of the land for the city felt anyway. So that all kind of happened around 2001. At that same time, as we really began saying, okay, it's real now, a site is coming into focus, the Community Foundation said, okay, now we're going to step up and really start raising money. And so we hired Susan Carson from Phillips and Associates, who actually was the same consultant that Orinda had hired. We interviewed 5 different firms, and we liked the same person that they had used. And the first thing that we learned is she said, you really should probably think on building a $10 million building. That's what it's going to cost nowadays. We sat there and held our breaths and said, $10 million?
Yeah.
What do we, and it, so, but
Frightening amount.
it was at the time. And we then, first thing you need to do is develop a case study. And so you have something to show people to say, this is what we're about, this is what we're raising our money for. And I have that here someplace for you, but I'm not sure where it is. Where's my case statement? Here it is. So this was our first brochure we created to talk about the library, of what, and to say what we were going to do. And so why we needed a new library. And there, at the time, there were still some folks saying, you don't really need a new library, books are obsolete. And we did a lot of work in the community to try to talk with those folks individually. We met with them individually, and we were armed with facts and figures, and they were armed with future thoughts. And we said, you know, our library has over 500 visitors a day. It's well used. We have the second largest circulation per capita of any library in the county. People use our library not just for books, for novels, but for a variety of learning experiences. So Susan Carson taught us that the first thing you need to do if you're raising money is to do a feasibility study. And that's basically what we paid her to do. We gave her a list of folks in the community that we thought would have an interest in the library, and she went and interviewed those people and came back to the foundation and to the library cabinet and said, this is what I found. So the survey said that, you know, it's going to be tough to raise that amount of money. If you get some large donations up front, you will be successful. If you can't get any large donations up front, it's going to be very difficult. So we took her words of wisdom to heart, and we said, okay, we're going to have to really present our case better. And she kept holding us back. She said, you can't go raise any money until you actually say, here's the picture of what it's going to look like. This is what it's going to be, this many square feet. And, you know, Rotary wanted to do a golf tournament for us. She said, no, you can't do that. You have to keep saying no. You can't raise small amounts of money because people will then think they have given. You have to raise large amounts of money. and you have to ask the people who have the capacity to give large amounts first. And that's called the quiet campaign. And we didn't know any of that in the beginning, but we learned. And we learned that, you know, you can talk about the new library and the need for a library, but don't ever ask anyone for money until you are sitting down and they know that's why you have come and that you're going to make a solicitation. And people don't generally give you large amounts of money unless you ask.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we trained ourselves in what to do, and we took classes here and there and read a lot, and we got great advice from our consultant. So that's basically what kind of kept us busy for the next 2 years, working on this quiet campaign.
Now, did the consortium idea come along with your appeal to these large investors, or?
Yes, but not till later. And
Okay.
we didn't really get any large gifts until 2003.
Okay.
Because it was in 2002 when the city set up the competition for the architects. We had interviewed, I think, 12 requests for proposals were sent out to 12 or 15 firms. We got some back, and out of that back on that committee, we said, here are 4 firms that would be good to work with for the city of Lafayette. We invited it may have actually been 6, and we invited those firms, only 4 ended up participating, to be in a competition to do a conceptual model and drawing of what a new library might look on the particular site. And then in the February of '03 is when they presented their ideas to the city. We had them at the old Veterans Building, and we announced it over a weekend. We put our little notice in the Sun the week before. We had over 400 people come to see it. And people didn't actually vote on the buildings, but they gave comments. There were comment cards. And then the committee met and had public hearings, and then the architect was hired. So after the architect was really hired, is then the Community Foundation. We had kind of finished working before with Susan Carson, our consultant, and we felt she was expensive because she lived and the offices were in Palo Alto, and you have to pay mileage and her time for driving over.
Well, and you were on your way at this juncture
and
anyway.
but we felt we really needed more help in how to actually structure the whole campaign.
I see.
And so we hired Bob Fisher at the time, who had created and worked for Buckman Associates, which was a big fundraising consultant firm here in the East Bay. And Bob, of course, knew everybody and had retired from JFK and the San Francisco Foundation by then.
Yeah.
And so it worked out really well. And he sat down and we sat down and we started talking about, okay, fundraising, we need to go after big lists, big folks of large amounts of money. We had collected lists. We knew we'd done studies of folks. We knew we needed to find somebody who knew each one of those persons to go with us, even if they felt uncomfortable making the ask. There were lots of us who felt comfortable making a solicitation, but we needed to get in the front door.
Yeah, good idea.
Also, at the same time, was coming up to time to apply for the state grant. Now, the state bond passed in the year 2000, a library funding measure passed statewide, and there had been 2 previous rounds of funding from that bond measure. We weren't ready to apply because you have to have the plans of your library to turn in to apply. And the 3rd round was going to be coming up at the end of 2003. And we said, well, we need to, how are we going to apply for that money? How are we going to be different from all the other libraries in the state that
I see.
want money.
Yeah.
You needed to show that you had collaborative projects, which we did from the very beginning with the school department, in the school board, from day one when we did Vision 2000. But we said, everybody's going to have that. How can we be different? And Roger Falcone was at our meeting, who was on the elementary school board district, and he said, you know, Lawrence Hall of Science, he's on their board too.
Yes.
He said, I bet they'd like to be a partner. He said, they're just like any museum. They've got all kinds of junk stored in the basement that they rotate in and out. They could rotate some of their stuff over to the library. You could have a great science display, and you could have some teachers do stuff, and they could be a partner. And we thought,
And that's how it started.
that's a grand idea. And then they came to one meeting, and they were so excited to be our partner. And Bob said, you know, if they're that excited to partner with us, he
Others.
said, others will too. And Bob was on the board for the zoo. And so Bob started writing letters with us. And I was also on the board for John Muir. And we started writing letters to 12 other nonprofit organizations. And that's how it really began. We developed the consortium idea of really lifelong learning and bringing all these other entities to Lafayette to deliver services. So it started with Roger, and Bob just expanded on the whole
To
concept.
me, that's the fun part.
It really is.
Just so exciting. Yeah, just so exciting.
And that idea is what really just made everything gel. And so then we had the plans in our hands. We had a concept of what kind of services we would deliver, not just lending out books. We had a beautiful building concept design, and we could go and talk to people and ask them for money. And we went and sat down with the Cronks, and I knew how much they were thinking about giving us. And we sat down and we talked and showed them the plans, and Rick and Janet got really excited.
Yeah.
And they said, we'll give you $1 million. And we were, yay.
Yeah.
We knew that we were off. And then that was in September. And then by December, I met with Bark Simpson. I'm on the board for Cal Shakes.
Oh, okay.
And so I know Bark and Sharon real well. And they used to live here in Lafayette.
They did, yes.
And he has his office here, and his getaway office, as he calls it.
I miss the museum. Those are
Yes,
still open.
yeah. And so I sat down, and it's a funny story because I know him real well, and we were supposed to meet at 8 o'clock, and somehow, or 7:30 we were supposed to meet, I guess, at Chow's, and I thought it was 8 o'clock. I got the time just screwed up. And I went back afterwards and I looked, and I had it written down right. I just had it wrong in my head. And I'm thinking, I'm strolling in, I'm all prepared anyway. He said, you're late. And I said, what? He said, I only have 15 minutes now. He said, do a good job and tell me about your project. I sat there and I just laid the whole thing out in 15 minutes. And he looked at me and he smiled. Of course, he knew what was going on. He said, I'll give you $1 million, Ann.
Wow.
Yay.
Wow.
So
That's fabulous.
it was, so we really got launched, and Bob had made the contact with the Valley Foundation and the Wayne and Gladys Valley Foundation, and he knew through being executive director of San Francisco, he knew the executive director, and he said, come and listen to what we're doing. And so I was there and made that presentation with Bob, and they gave us $1.5 million. So after that, there was no doubt. We knew we could succeed.
Yeah.
And we set the goal at that point, or around that time, that we would raise $11 million. $9 million for the library itself from the foundation, and $2 million to go into an endowment for maintaining the library. And that we weren't going to raise X amount and then the endowment. We were going to raise every dollar for dollar. So out of every $11 that came in, $2 would go into the pot for the endowment.
Very smart.
And the Valley Foundation, their gift was contingent on us raising all $11 million. And we said, okay. And we just kept thinking we had that 1.5 million in the pot, and we just kept talking about it. And you know, success breeds
That's how it
success.
happens.
You
That
know,
is how it
it
happens.
really does. And so the needs assessment was done in January of '04, and the consultants the city hired finished that up. And then for a good part of '04, Steve Falk and I worked on lobbying the state bond board. We knew that, you know, we would be perceived as the rich city not needing any money.
Yeah.
They had to understand that we were incorporated as a limited tax city, that we didn't have a big tax base. We had little retail sales tax coming in.
Yeah.
We had to explain that to the members of the bond board, and we worked hard doing that. And most cities pay for lobbyists, but Lafayette doesn't have money for that kind of a thing. And it worked to our advantage because we went in person and talked to these people, whereas the lobbyist was representing, you know, 3 cities all wanting bond money. And so we were representing our own point of view.
Wow.
And we sometimes we only got to talk to staff members, and we were quite frustrated because as the year went on, some of the bond board members changed as their libraries couldn't get their act together and apply for money. They decided they didn't want to waste their time being on the bond board.
So you had to start over
Yeah,
each time.
so it was really interesting. And Dee Dee Alpert, I thought I had an in with. I had met her before and just never could get an appointment in Sacramento, and said, she said, well, I have lots of time open in my office in San Diego. So Steve and I looked at each other.
Oh my.
We hopped on the plane, paid for it myself,
Oh my.
flew to San Diego for the day, and we had a great meeting with her and laid out the whole thing of the consortium, why we were different, what we were doing that was different.
Well, that probably made the difference right there.
And we did our big public launch in April of '04.
Yeah.
We knew we had community support.
Yeah.
We had 3,500 people come out to
Yeah.
that was great.
You know, I'm going to stop you just for
Okay.
a minute because I've got a question here. It
Yeah,
says,
yeah.
why do you think that the citizens of Lafayette have responded so enthusiastically to the new library project?
I think because we built support up slowly and carefully, that they really understood the need. It wasn't a few people saying, oh, this is a nice to have thing, a new building.
Yeah.
People really saw the need, and from a whole variety of different groups, we had involvement from
Yeah.
the very day one.
Very carefully done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so we really, and when we did the focus groups, I mean, we made sure we had friends from the Lafayette Nursery School as well as from the seniors groups. And we tried to get everyone involved. And as we launched the foundation, the board members, the first group of board members on the foundation represented every group in town, because we didn't want anyone to be fearful that we would be stealing money from them. We didn't want LASF to think, oh no, people are going to give the money to them and won't give it to us. They needed to know what we were doing and how we would be different.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's why I think that was
Well,
different.
as one of my other interviewees said, Lafayette really knew how to do it right. You know, the steps along the way.
Well, you know, we didn't really from the beginning, but we
you
made it
learned.
our
You learned.
job to figure
Yeah,
out how to do it
exactly.
right. And then we started having events and bringing the public in. In June of '04, we had a Meet the Architects event at the Park Hotel.
Yes, I remember that.
And we had a couple of brunches for folks that would give large gifts, and we didn't ever ask anybody for money at these events, just information.
Right.
We wanted to do our asks individually and say, it's down and say to people, this is really what we're doing. And I never, you know, I never asked the Kronks for $1 million. I never asked Bark Simpson for $1 million. I just laid it out what we would need and our goals were. And it really
And they
worked
came
out.
forward,
They came
yeah.
forward. By October of '04, we'd gotten the Lesher Foundation grant of $500,000.
I didn't know about that one.
And That's and then in November of '04, we won the state grant for $11.9 million.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was, have people explained to you that whole day?
No.
Okay. We went to Sacramento. We planned our talk. We got 5 minutes to make a presentation,
Really?
5 or 8 minutes, something not very long. Um, and because it's a public hearing, all of the libraries that had applied to the state could stand up and use that time to make their presentation, whether they had gotten a rating of acceptable in their applications or not. So even some libraries who got a very low rating, you'd have to turn in these, well, the application took about a year to prepare, as I had
I'm
mentioned
sure.
before.
Yeah.
They're like 3 binders, yay thick, of all the material the state has to have you include, from the covered bike parking to the focus groups to, you know, accessibility to everything that, you know, you have all these long forms to fill out. Anyway, I feel bad because some little tiny cities don't have staff to do that, and in library districts, and volunteers are doing it, and it's really hard to compete when somebody, that's their job, knowing how to fill those forms
Yeah,
out.
right.
But so, you know, other places stood up. People brought busloads of kids in. The hearings went on all day, 8 hours of hearings in Sacramento, in the convention center. And the bond board members, this was I guess the Monday or the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. As late as Wednesday before, one of the bond board members changed.
Oh.
But again, we were lucky. The new bond board member was Lois Wolk, from Assembly member from Sonoma County. And we went to the hearings with our superintendent of schools from the elementary district, as well as the Acalanes district, and school board members, and Elizabeth Stage from Lawrence Hall, and Roger Whitmore,
Mm-hmm.
and city council members, and library folks. So we had our own contingency.
Indeed.
The new superintendent of schools in Lafayette, the woman who had just been hired, was friends with Lois Wilk.
Oh.
Went up, hi,
Oh.
I'm from Lafayette, good to see you,
Oh.
haven't seen you in a long time. We had some connection. The person who had been head librarian in San Francisco had just been appointed to be state librarian. The former Ken Starr retired. We had spent time letting her know about our project, and we knew she was excited about our project. Didi Alpert was not there. She had her staff there. And it was interesting. They had 2 staff members sitting, taking notes in, you know, doing the job right.
Yeah.
And then there was another person that we had talked to, and another person who represented the public. He was appointed, I guess, by the governor. He was the counsel for Kaufman and Broad Homes. And we knew he wanted to support Antioch because they had built so many homes out in Antioch. Anyway, so the bond board has those long hearings, and everybody stands up. And we got there early enough. We sat in the front row, and we had sashes, Lafayette, or whatever it said. It was a cute thing. So we were identified, and people knew who we were. We gave our talk. We had timed it to the minute. It was very professional with who was doing our speeches. And then we had to sit and wait. And then they started making their deliberations. First out of the box, they made a motion and funded 5 libraries. No discussion.
Really?
That's Sacramento. See, in local politics, there's the Brown Act. You can't make any agreements before the meeting, but those things do not apply to state government.
Oh.
So there were behind the, backroom deals that had been made, and we sat and looked at each other. Well, okay.
Little worrisome.
We knew that we had it was a long shot, but we felt pretty sure that Contra Costa was going to get some money, because the bond measure had been written originally by Dick Rainey and put on the ballot. But we were also up against Antioch and Walnut Creek.
Yes.
And I think they had applied before and
Well,
didn't
I think
get it.
Antioch did for sure.
I know they had, one of them had applied before and hadn't gotten
Yeah.
it awarded. So we knew that there was, you know, there were favorites, but we still thought it was worth a shot. So the bond board's deliberating, and they go back and forth. There's mention of our library, there's mention of Antioch, there's mention of Walnut Creek, and then we're kind of all forgotten about. Other libraries, there's a motion to fund a library here or there. Anyway, the staff has an overhead projector. They have the total amount of how many millions they had. They're subtracting, blah, blah, blah. They're getting down lower and lower. And they kept coming back. Well, we really feel we should give some money to Contra Costa County because they haven't gotten any money out of the whole bond measure, and each county deserves something. So we thought, well, that's code for Walnut Creek, because as a thank you, because Dick Rainey was sitting in the audience with Sue. And but then they kept giving money to other libraries. A motion was made for us, and it died for lack of a second. So another bond member said, I'm not going to give money to a rich city when there are other cities that really need it. And so then a motion was made to give money to Oakland, which I felt good. They really deserved the money. It was East Oakland branch that really needed the money and had no other chance of getting any money. And so that was a good thing. And then their other money was given away. And then we looked at the pot, what was left. It was like, I think it was $16 million. Well, Walnut Creek and Antioch had asked for $18 million or something, more than what was left.
Oh, more than what was
And
left.
the deal was, you got what you asked for. They was not less. You got what was asked for. They couldn't give you a portion of it. And so then the bond board members are sitting looking at each other, and you see them kind of looking at each other. They realized their mistake.
Oh.
They had wanted to give to either Antioch or Walnut Creek. And so then Lois Wolk made the motion
And someone seconded.
for Lafayette, and she said, I'd like to bring Lafayette up again. And the head librarian of the state, who had been from San Francisco, said, I think we should make a motion that has several libraries in a package to fund this last amount of money. And she said, I would recommend also that we include a branch in San Francisco. And so the two of them are sitting next to each other, and they said, that's good. We can do Lafayette, and we'll do the branch in San Francisco. And then they had less than $1 million left.
Wow.
Who are we going to give it to? Well, no one that had been approved from the staff level asked for that small amount. But a little tiny library, Plumas County, which was the B level,
Yeah.
had applied, but their application didn't rise to the level of what it should have. And they had never had a library in their county,
Oh.
and they wanted this to remodel something to turn it into a library. And so the motion was made, and this was 6 o'clock at night, and the other bond board members are fed up and tired, and so they made the motion, and we got it, and that was it.
That is an amazing story.
And we were just so excited, and Antioch and Walnut Creek were livid, so mad, and council member from Antioch came over to Erling Horn, and he was just livid, just yelling at him. But that wasn't our fault. It was the bond board. Not that they made the decision, us against them. It's that they had
just
already given the
happened.
money
Yeah.
away. Walnut Creek understood. They saw what happened. It was just like grinding teeth. And what can you do about it?
Oh, my.
You know,
I had never heard that story. That is amazing. Wow.
So the Contra Costa Times was calling us. We talked to them on the cell phone going on, because they had basically, I think, written the story for Walnut Creek or Antioch getting it, because they kind of felt that that's how it was going to happen. Antioch, they felt, had more needs.
Well, they do have meat.
They do.
Yeah.
And more now, of course,
Yeah.
than then.
Yeah.
And Walnut Creek was a favorite because of Dick Rainey having done the original bond measure when he was a senator. He sponsored the ballot measure. Anyway, so that's the story of how we got that $11.9 million. But it was because of doing our homework, but because of the consortium. And when the motion was made, the state librarian said that we really want we're going to have future bond measures. We're going to have come before us in money that the state will be giving out. When we talk about partnering in with other organizations, Lafayette's the model for the entire state. And that made us feel really good.
Wow.
So we were really excited, and
Well, you deserve that, I do believe.
it really was a great thing at that time.
Oh, wow. Well, don't you feel proud?
Yes.
You have carried this baby to birthing.
It was when we open and we have the new historical space. I've got all the notes from that day of how
Okay.
much each person,
Oh,
all the
look at
different
that.
libraries, and
Look at that.
and the votes and everything.
Yes, hang on to all of
I've
that,
got all of
because
this.
They will want it.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It's like
When they have
I've
a place
saved
for
it.
Yeah,
So
that's terrific. But
We've
these
got
I
that.
may keep in
Yeah,
hand
you
on.
can keep those,
Okay,
yeah.
Great. And this too.
yeah,
Great.
yeah.
Wonderful.
So that's
Thank
good. So that's what happened.
Wow. you.
Then
What a story.
Then Phil Angelides came to town and brought us a big check. Well, he was running for governor at the time, you know.
Okay.
But he came to our little library, and the state really wanted to make a big thing out of it. And then we started having the house parties,
Yes.
going to people's
Yes.
homes, really getting out into the
Yes.
community. We were more in a public phase at that time. And then by the end of 2007, the Community Foundation spun off the organization to create the new Lafayette Library and Learning Center Foundation. We created a whole new board whose sole job would be the care and feeding of the library. And we advertised in the newspaper for people that wanted to apply for the jobs,
Yes.
and we filled those with specific people who had backgrounds in finance and a variety of different things to make sure we had really a great board of people. And we had people who applied that are just fabulous. So that's kind of
That is
how the whole story came about.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, because it is such invaluable information,
Yeah.
and we haven't gotten it anywhere else. So
One
this is
of the
special.
last things that we will have for future use is that we had over 200 volunteers working on behalf of the library, and we have an organizational chart showing all the different committees.
I was on one of them.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like,
Yeah. Amazing,
and that's
isn't it?
when you ask the question, why are people excited and why they, because I think everybody feels that they've been a part of it, and that makes a huge difference.
It makes a huge difference. You're
It's,
exactly
you know,
right.
it's not one person making it their project.
No.
It's everybody
our
having a
project.
hand
Yes,
in it.
our project.
And you know, one person couldn't do it. It's been better because everybody's had part in it.
So, thank you for all of that. Just a few more quick
Sure.
questions, and then I'll let you go. This is about the library's future, and maybe you have a thought about the outcome. It says here, what outcome do you hope for the most for the new library? What do you look forward to using, doing, enjoying the most, perhaps?
Well, I just think it's going to be well used by the community, and I just look forward to seeing all those kids in the library and having a place to sit down. You know, not one chair for middle school kids by a turnstile.
Oh, exactly. A central place. Oh, now they're really going. Sorry.
Don't want to pull this out. Hold on here.
Oh, bless you. Thank you.
So as well as all of the wonderful consortium programs, I think that I'm on the committee talking with the different consortium partners, and they're anxious to start. It's interesting. Oakland Zoo has a concept that they want to be able to teach classes that really teach zoology. So instead of just bringing the zoo animals out for kids to pet once in a while,
Yeah.
they want to be able
A
to
learning experience.
have a real program. So if you start in kindergarten and you go to one class, that when you're in second
Oh.
grade, you take the next class.
Oh,
You take the
oh.
So by the time you graduate, you will have taken classes, so
That's
you really
fabulous.
understand. I mean, what a wonderful
That is
idea.
fabulous.
I mean, each one of our consortium partners is thinking outside of the box of what they can do and what programs they can bring to teach us things they're already doing at their facility, but that they can share and
Bring into
and
the
have. They
community.
all have an outreach in their mission, and have you can't have a facility like the Oakland Zoo, as wonderful it is, without serving the whole East Bay. And so it's so fabulous.
So is it your hope too that children or folks from outside the particular community here might come and enjoy those?
Oh, I
things
know
as
they
well?
will. I know that it will be the hub for all of Central County.
Great, great. Some people predicted the internet would kill the printed word and libraries would become obsolete. How will our new library avoid such a fate?
I think as a lifelong learning center, we have sort of like when they invented computers, they told us that paper was going to go away.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't
Yeah.
seen that happen. I
No.
just see more paper than ever. I think it's, in Lafayette, what do we have, 40 book clubs or something if you talk to Dave at the bookstore? It's not obsolete. Things just change. It's another resource people have, the internet. The information age is fabulous. It's wonderful. The more resources we have, the better.
And someone said to me, and it will continue to evolve. 40 years from now, it'll be different than it is now. It will continue to change and grow and develop. How do you think the library will affect, better serve, or enhance our sense of community?
I think its location
Yeah.
is number one. If you take a map of Lafayette and you fold it, it's kind of right in the middle.
Kind of right in the middle?
You know,
Yeah, yeah.
it's interesting if you do, from Release Valley to
That's
Burton
true.
Valley.
Yeah, that's true.
It is, and I think it's going to be the hub of our community.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Is there anyone else you think we should contact for an interview? Well, you did give me that list of folks, and there may be others.
Yeah, I don't know everyone that you've done,
No, you
but
don't. No, you
it's.
don't. Okay.
I can go over that list sometime with you. I think that.
Okay. Well, we'll take a look at the list that you gave us, and
Yeah.
then somebody perhaps can call you
Yeah.
in the future if that's
Yeah.
important to do.
Well, and I'm really grateful that this is all being put down and together because it does have a long history of how it got
has a
started.
long history and an important history, and it's monumental for the community, I think. Have I left anything out? Do you have any final thoughts?
No, I've got more material. I'm going to sort through here that I
Yeah.
pulled out. I had some articles, some of the newspaper articles that we first did.
Okay.
And what you need to, I don't have copies of all of our materials that we did. These were just some of the beginning ones.
Yeah.
As you know, there were all kinds of events that we had as we went along.
Yeah.
And I'm sure somebody else will pull all those together for you. Hilma
Oh, yes,
has all of
absolutely.
copies of all
Yeah,
of that stuff.
absolutely. But they will be happy
Yeah.
to have those.
But I did find this original one that we
Yeah.
picked, and
Yeah.
then the Vision 2000.
Oh,
So
that's fabulous. Important to have. So, my thanks to you so much for
Well,
your willingness and your time.
sorry
and
I
your being
talked for so long.
articulate about all of this, and you really gave us the history of how this has come to be.
so it's
thank
been
you
a
so
fun
much.
project.